Greetings. Tokunbo Adelekan here again with pages and paragraphs. The first book I would like to bring to your attention today is a book entitled A Different Mirror. A Different Mirror. Subtitled A History of Multicultural America by a great and legendary thinker by the name of Ronald Takaki, who is professor of cultural studies at UC Berkeley. Served on that faculty in a distinguished way for many years. What I like about A Different Mirror is that what Professor Takaki does is he expands our imagination by giving us a bird's eye view of American history and American legacy, by allowing us to see how various and distinct ethnic groups have contributed to the great mosaic of this rich land. He talks about the history of Native Americans, of African Americans, of women, of Latin Americans, of Irish, and of course, all Americans coming together to form this rich mosaic. He shows their contributions to democratic culture, to the struggle for freedom, to political integrity in terms of us being a nation of laws. He shows their commitment to equality, and he shows that the American history of democracy cannot be traced simply to Europe, but is a rich, as I said earlier, mosaic of different peoples that have struggled for freedom through suffering, but have all made a great contribution to who this nation is and to what this nation has become. And so it's very important as we talk about justice and peace, and as we talk about revising, amen, the laws of this nation and the policies of this nation, and as we talk about mounting anti-racial struggles, that we begin to mine the rich history of our country and celebrate the virtue, the value, and the visions of the variety of ethnic groups and cultural identities that have added to the rich legacy of this country. A Different Mirror by Professor Ronald Takaki. The next book I want to lift up is by my teacher, Gloria Wade Gales. This book is called Pushed Back to Strength. Pushed Back to Strength, a black woman's journey home. Dr. Wade Gales taught English literature at Spelman University. What we loved about her classes, Spelman College, we loved about her classes is her classes were so well attended by brothers from Morehouse and by students from Morris Brown and Clark University. To enter her class was to enter a world of ideas. It was to enter a theater of values, because she taught us the power of love. She taught us how to love ourselves as young African American people that were struggling with personal issues, cultural issues, and political issues. And this woman would open up texts of Toni Morrison, open up texts of Langston Hughes, walk us through the rich history of African American literature, and European literature, and show us the rich humanistic legacy that we had before us. But in this book, Pushed Back to Strength, she talks about a time in her youth where, as she lived in the segregated South, in the crucible of race, while she encountered white supremacy and she saw the public display of cruel white people. And she talked about how she would go home to her grandmother and ask, why are they so mean to us? And her grandmother would say that when they're mean to you, and I'm paraphrasing, during the week, you would go to church and sing. You would go to church and serve. You would go to church and pray. You would go to church and praise. You would go to church and hear preaching. And so what white supremacy did was push us back to strength. And when we came back to our own, when we came back to God, when we came back to the holy ground of the black church, we would find the spirit of renewal and regeneration and reinvigoration to go back and address the world. And I thank God for the Gloria Wade Gales. I thank God that she brought her talents to lift up young African American minds. And I want to say to you, beloved, that even in this day of fascism in America, even in this day where people are openly attacking black lives and black beauty and black dignity, I've come back to say that there's hope alive, because they are simply pushing us back to our families and pushing us back to our history and pushing us back to our churches and pushing us back to our spirituality, and they're pushing us back to our God. And so I challenge you today to go back and find the Gloria Wade Gales of your life. Those teachers, those mentors, those deacons, those trustees, those grandmothers, those grandfathers, those parents, those people, those coaches that taught you how to affirm yourself and love yourself in spite of the attacks to your dignity and humanity. So to all of the teachers that taught us how to alleviate suffering and to love our black selves, we salute you. Push Back to Strength by Sister Dr. Professor Gloria Wade Gales. The next book I have is a book by one of the greatest minds of American history, that great teacher, mentor, professor, historian, and strategist, Vincent Harding. He wrote a book called Hope and History. Hope and History. And by that, he's trying to signify that at the end of the day, it's not the vote, as important as it is. It's not economic liberation. It's not education that have lifted and loved black people, that has lifted and loved suffering peoples. It is hope. That because hope against hope allows us to see a better day ahead, we now have the intellectual weaponry and the spiritual wherewithal to go back and engage in proper political activism and social action, and to develop economic and financial initiatives and practices to move our families and our people from where they are. It is the hope of God. It is the work of the Spirit. It is the faith of the fathers that lifted us, that allowed us to overcome slavery and Jim Crow and Jane Crow. And it's the hope that allowed us to strategize. It is the hope in our songs. It was the hope in the marches. It was the hope in the boycotts that lifted talented people from Louisiana to Alabama, that lifted great souls from Mississippi to Texas, that taught us to say we ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. And so this book is Hope and History, why we must share the story of the movement. And I would say that the reason why we must share the story of the movement is because the movement can be seen as a relay race. There's the generation of the John Jasper, the generation of the Harriet Tubman, the generation of the David Walker, the generation of the Booker T. Washington and Ida B. Wells Barnett, and the Niagara movement with W.B. Du Bois. Then there's the generation of the Marcus Garvey. Then there's the generation of the Adam Clayton Powell Sr. and the Mordecai Johnson and the Benjamin Elijah Mays and the Howard Thurman. And then there's the generation, beloved, of the Toni Morrisons and the Maya Angelou's, beloved. Then there's the generation of the Shirley Chisholms and the Ella Bakers. There are rich generations, and each generation has their own story to tell. And we thank God for all of these rich people that have taught us. And now it's time for the Black Lives Matter movement. And each generation must share their stories. We must share their stories with those that have come before and share the stories with those that have come after. Because no generation has a monopoly on truth. And today is the generation, or the day of the generations of people that must now take the lessons, take the truths, take the knowledges, take the energy of those that have come before, and continue to move our people and this nation to the place of love and liberty and the pursuit not just of happiness, but of joy, where we can all value each other as image bearers of Jesus Christ. Hope in history. Finally, during this segment, I want to lift up another book by my teacher, Henry Louis Gates Jr. What I want to celebrate about Henry Louis Gates Jr. and other teachers of mine, Gloria Wade Gales and Toni Morrison and Ann Watts and Morehouse, is the ways in which they celebrated and they continue to celebrate the diversity of African American culture. What I like about them is that they taught us, again, the plurality and even the multicultural aspects within African American people. That there's no African American that is the same with another African American. When we look, if you will, at the rich array of talent, that there's no musical genius that is like the other. That there's no writing genius that is like the other. That in writing you have a Toni Morrison and you have a Maya Angelou. In the arts you have Oprah Winfrey and you have Whoopi Goldberg. In politics, praise God, you have Valerie Jarrett and you have a rich array. Kamala Harris, you have a rich array of talent in all of these areas. And so we need to celebrate the rich diversity of knowing how to be black. We cannot allow people and living black, we cannot allow people to say, well, African American women only have this role in society. A young black man only have this role. That when it comes to military prowess, we are there. When it comes to writing, we're there. When it comes to education, we're there. When it comes to TV, we're there. Baseball and golf. That we can celebrate the rich diversity of being black as a black Brit, as a genius from Kenya, Patrice Lumumba, as a political hero like Nelson Mandela. And what I like about Henry Louis Gates, I want to lift up his book called 13 Ways of Looking at a Black Man, that even each person can be seen in different ways. And so I want to lift up people like Malcolm X, lift up Louis Farrakhan, lift up LeBron James, lift up Athel Gibson, lift up Serena Williams, lift up Michelle Obama, lift up Ann Watts, lift up Gloria Wade Gales, lift up Brenda Thomas, lift up Prathia Hall-Wynn, lift up Jackie Grant, lift up Katie Cannon, lift up Claudette Copeland, lift up Vashti McKenzie. That we need to keep on lifting up the fact that there's no limit to how we can express ourselves as brilliant, God-ordained, God-called, image-bearing African Americans, and all of us have a role to play. And if there's one thing my teachers have taught me, it means that we need to hook up with genius. We need to be counterintuitive, as Henry Louis Gates would say. That you become great not because you're great in and of yourself and you hook up with people that have inferior talent or people that only clap for you. But you become great because counterintuitively you can celebrate greatness wherever you find it, and you hook up with other people in the university of culture by saying that, yes, I can see greatness in somebody else, and so I want to shape my mind. And other people through exchange and stimulation show you how to unleash your greatness. Michael Jordan did not become great in basketball simply because he put other people down. He became great because he respected the rich legacy of those around him, and he decided to develop himself, not over against them all the time, not by putting them down, but in competition with them, friendly competition. And that's what we need to do. We do not need to be ashamed of being with other geniuses. That if somebody has a talent, we need to recognize it, get close to it, not confiscate it, not hide it, not talk about it, not tear it down, but say that's a brother right there, and that's a sister, that's a child that has unique gifts of talent and creativity. I close by lifting up Othello. Remember that Othello was in love. This is Shakespeare now. Othello, the greatest Othello ever played, was by a great genius by the name of Paul Robeson, I believe, if you would have asked me. And Othello was in love with Desdemona, and there was Iago there. And Iago could not appreciate somebody else's love and somebody else's greatness. And he began to sow seeds of destruction in that relationship, envy. And he turned Othello against Othello. And Othello became Othello's worst enemy simply because an enemy of Othello planted seeds of destruction. So I want to say to my brothers and my sisters, locally and globally, beware of the spirit of Othello that will come and infiltrate the communities of love, that will come in and be envious of this great march towards liberty, this great crusade of righteousness. Enemies from the outside that will infiltrate what God has ordained and call us to turn against each other. I declare by the prophetic spirit in me that will not happen for this generation, that we will put up angels at our tent doors, and we will refuse to allow a spirit of divisiveness, of dereliction, of degradation, and of destruction to penetrate the ranks of what God is calling us to do for the generations to come. Remember, at the end of the day, we are not called to deliver greatness for ourselves or even for America. We're called to deliver greatness for God, because where we are going and what we are becoming has been God ordained. And God is the one that will have to tell us, well done, good and faithful servant. I want to hear him say, well done, good and faithful generation, because you have pleased me and you have sought my will over everything else. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not to thy own understanding. In all thy ways we must acknowledge him and he will direct our paths. Beloved, let us listen to the Spirit, because the Spirit will show us how to navigate these times. Walk together, children. Don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. Tokunbo, Adelekan here. Paragraphs and pages to our community, local and global. We love you and we'll see you soon. Peace and blessings.